So either, in Myers-Briggs, you're either sensing or intuitive, meaning you
Okay.
either like to do things the way that they've been done before, or you like to extrapolate.
Okay.
Um, sensors are the reason we have like Japanese level craftsmanship, where you could be the guy who just makes sushi rice for 10 years, right? Like an intuitive person will never be able to do that because they would go fucking insane.
I don't know about
Um,
Myers Briggs. I think that might be astrology for smart women.
no, you're an INTJ. I'm also an INTJ. Kiara Vickers is an INTJ. Is good people. Is INTJ master race. But no,
What?
I mean,
Hold on.
just
I didn't
more
even
more
know what
in.
INTJ is. You're making jokes. Just
So there. Okay, so there's 16. For before we get into, I will diffuse the astrology component of this. So Myers Briggs is based on Jungian typology, which means there are four methods by which we receive information from the world. Right. This is sensing, meaning past experiences, direct sensory information. Right.
okay.
Technically, all information comes from sensing at its core, but how we process that information differs, right?
Okay.
Intuition, which is can I extrapolate based on these concepts, which is what we've just been describing, right? Uh, Thinking is can I logically, do Boolean operators and Aristotelian logic and shit, and feeling, which most people actually don't think is terribly valid, but I think you probably are more familiar with the fact that emotions actually matter and are a good way to deal with the world. We just demonize the shit out of it because of Western culture. So
Hmm.
then on top of that, you have all of these functions. There is an order that they go in. There are four of them. They can all be interchanged, and they will either be oriented introverted or extroverted. So whatever your lead function is when we say this person is an introvert or an extrovert. What do you lead with? So for an INTJ is introverted intuition. They also alternate down so it'll be introverted extrovert, or vice versa.
Okay.
So introverted intuition, meaning internally processing large amounts of data before reaching a conclusion. Right? It's intuitive. It comes from the gut or from whatever. Then extroverted thinking, meaning how do I apply these big concepts to the world in a functional way? Right? You're testing against reality. You're saying this needs to be useful, practical, efficient. Introverted feeling. So what your internal values are, what you think about things, not what other people think about things.
Hmm.
And then extroverted sensing, which I don't know exactly. Extrovert sensing means like, does this work in reality? Has this worked in the past? But that's the inferior function because it's at the bottom, so it's not
Got
something
it.
that.
So you think about it a bunch, you see how you feel about it, and
Well,
then you
it's not
test it and see if
intuition
it
and thinking
works.
are intuition and thinking are different.
Okay.
So intuition is more of an unconscious process, right? Your brain. If you ever had flashes of insight,
Sure.
that's intuition at work.
Okay.
Insight is a component of intuition, whereas your brain, I mean, we consciously thinking about things is also one of our strong suits. So, like manually solving a problem, but intuition is your gut when it spits out the right answer. You say, "Oh, I know what to do," right? Or you've
Hmm.
got a read on that person when you meet them, and you're like, "Yeah, 100%." And you find out later you were right. But if you ever ignore that part of yourself, you're like, "Well, that was stupid." And eventually, you learn to trust your intuition because your intuition is valid, just like your feelings are valid, just like what worked in the past is sometimes valid, just like thinking is valid, right? But they're
Yeah.
situational. So the mistake that people make when they refer to the Myers-Briggs is they think that the test is accurate when the test is not accurate. It's the each person has an orientation that encompasses these all four of these things. They have a priority order in which they use them, and they have an orientation as to whether they're introverted or extroverted. And so the test has given it a very bad rap because the test mistypes people all the time, and then people think it's astrological or something. But the functions are Jungian, and Jung, I don't know. There's nobody else I would put as high on the pedestal of really knowing what the fuck the brain does as him. He's also kind of nuts, but I like nuts people. But he's a genius. And also, if somebody can give me a fifth function, like a fifth way of uh, interfacing with reality that isn't one of those four things, I would love to hear it. I don't think there is one. It would be like a psychic thing, maybe. I don't know. But otherwise, I'm convinced there are just four. Um, at any rate, uh, the the types are, a hierarchy of these four things in specific orders, and there are predictable behaviors about these sorts of people because if you process information in a certain way, you get a certain result, regardless of the information itself. People just behave predictably. So INTJs are generally have what is called the death stare, which is a very non-expressive resting bitch face kind of thing. They are known to be big picture systems thinkers that are very dispassionate, probably the most uh, critical, like intellectually humble of all the types, because they don't have a lot of ego in the problem solving, and they'd rather be right than socially correct. And so the downside is because they don't have extroverted feeling in their stack, they have introverted feeling. It's more about, does it seem right? Does it work? And then how do I feel about it? Whereas someone like an ENFJ, who has extroverted feeling very high in their stack, cares about, how does this affect group cohesion? How does it affect other people's feelings? Right. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because these little distinctions really make a lot of sense, and you can start to see it with people, and you can generally predict once you have a deep. It's taken me like a year or so to really like try and guess all the people and their functions and stuff, but once you get it, you can make pretty accurate assessments about how people act and how they think. And that's the upside of this versus astrology, is that this has predictive validity, meaning I can guess fairly accurately what people are, and that information is useful. Whereas if you ever meet hardcore astrology people, I have yet to find someone that has been able to guess my astrological sign within 6 tries when they're at 12 total. That is not good odds, right? There's no
I
predictive
see.
validity, and that's my metric for success here. Whether astrology provides some kind of emotional value is a different thing, and I don't generally criticize spirituality things in the realm of emotional value. I criticize them when they start trying to predict shit with them, right? Because then you're trying to bring in the field of the tangible, and it doesn't live there. It shouldn't be. You don't use science for your heart. You don't use spirituality as a ruler, right? They should stay on their side of the street. And
I don't
rant.
know what side of the street they each belong on. That's I don't know. I also don't even know if I would call the way that most people use astrology spirituality, because
Agreed.
yeah, it seems
I would say most
more
people use it as like a weak prophecy slash personality test.
yeah, personality
Full.
test is the way it's used. I mean, there's some people I know who they'll break out like the full chart and need to know the exact time of your birth, and you know.
I'm more interested in it from, so that's the thing. I have yet to be compellingly convinced of any kind of astrological validity, but I'm open to it because I feel like the fact that it persists means there has to be some kind of value to it. I have yet to understand what it is. So, for example, like I read a lot of esoterica, just because I think that if people were going to figure the world out by reading the classics, the world wouldn't be so fucked up. So obviously the answer is not in the things that everybody's doing. You got to go somewhere else. So I was like, all right, I'm going to read all this weird shit. Like tarot, for example, is a great example of this. I love tarot. I think it's fascinating. It is the best. The whoever made it has the best understanding of like archetypal human psychology out of anyone. It is a beautiful, like, it's there is no yes or no answers. It's all universal human experiences that apply to everyone at any given time, right? And the degree to which anybody can relate to it, if you're willing to like look at yourself through that lens, is beautiful. And it doesn't have to have any kind of magic to it. It's just really deep psychology that's applied. So I have to imagine at some point someone who really gets astrology is going to explain it to me in a way that makes sense. So I'm open to it, but I have yet to be impressed. And I generally do just ask people like, "Oh, what type am I?" And then they never guess. And that's until somebody can guess correctly, then I'll be like, "All right, why? How do you know that?" You know. But it's 1 in 12. It can't be that hard.
Yeah, I haven't seen the practical application of it yet, other than telling me things about my personality that I already know. But maybe that's also why I was initially dismissive of Myers Briggs, because it's like, well, I feel like I know my own personality fairly well. And I tend to think our personalities are more malleable if we want them to be.
It's not about malleable. For example, I'm extremely extroverted for someone who's extremely introverted, right? I'm probably the most extroverted introverted person. Most people think I'm extroverted because I'm always socializing and doing people shit. I'm 100% introverted in my heart. I can sit inside in the house and just like play piano and read a book and never talk to anyone again, and I would be very happy with that. But I resolved a long time ago that if I, like I mentioned, if I was ever going to get anywhere in a meaningful way, I had to learn the people stuff, and so I forced myself to do it. And so I'm fluent. I've made myself fluent in extroversion, although I hate it. And if I do too much extroverting over a long period of time, I suffer. Um, so it's not they're not rigid. It's simply just you have preferences, right? That part is pretty much built in. I don't know whether it's an ingrained thing or it's a what were you rewarded for or punished for in childhood sort of thing. Obviously, like my family's pretty supportive and stuff, but
I
they're
mean,
not very emotional.
you're getting into the nature nurture thing, and that's always hard to predict too, because the people who are nurturing you are usually also the people who you got your genes from. So, like, is it that you're like your parents because you have their genes, or you're like your parents because everything that you experienced growing up was the result of their choices?
It's yeah, I mean it's both. It's so the one of the things is like generally intuitives have intuitive kids and sensors have sensor kids, but sensors can sometimes have intuitive kids. Although sensing and intuition correlate with IQ pretty strongly. So, I mean there are smart sensors, but it's a different kind of intelligence. But generally, like your prototypical uh, nerd is an INTP. Like the ideal academic is an INTP because they're very good specialists. Whereas I am an INTJ. I would guess you are an INTJ. We're good generalists, right? I abhor if I had to learn one thing forever, it would destroy me. I need to look at more stuff and know the bigger picture. But INTPs don't have that problem, and they tend to be even a little bit smarter. They just have the issue of blinders because they're about their subject and they're willing to cast aside a lot of other things as a result of that because they lead with introverted thinking instead of introverted intuition. So it's more about the logical thing and less about the making intuitive leaps, which leads you to other fields of study. Um, and so there are people who buck the template for these things. It's not about like rigid categories. It's about how do you prefer to interact with the world, right? And for me, that's intuition. I'm going to be driven by whatever my gut says about things, and then I'm going to think about it and try and apply that to what I'm doing.
Thank you for listening to the Brendon Marotta Show. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone else who would also like it, and then go on whatever platform you listen to the show on and leave a positive review. If you want to support the show directly, go to brendonmarotta.com/show and subscribe there. Paid subscribers get special unreleased bonus material and live events that are only available to them. Once again, that is brendonmarotta.com/show. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you all later.